Manufacturing cancel culture, in quotation marks, at UT and really throughout Texas higher education. Here's a blog on crisis discourse, governance, and the politics of Senate Bill 17 and Senate Bill 37 in the state of Texas. March 1st, 2025. Something remarkable has happened at the University of Texas at Austin and throughout Texas higher education in a state with a long history of suppressing Mexican American studies, resisting desegregation, and policing the boundaries of public knowledge. We are now told that women and gender studies and ethnic studies are a true threat to free speech. Accordingly, the American Association of University Professors, AAUP, warns that increasing legislative interference in curriculum and governance poses a direct threat to academic freedom by subordinating professional judgment to political authority. Let all of this sink in. Fields that are devoted to studying power, inequality, race, gender, and colonialism, etc., they're being framed as the problem. They're being framed as authoritarian. And the state is intervening ostensibly to protect liberty. This narrative did not arise from faculty misconduct or accreditation failures or scholarly scandal. It was constructed, it was amplified, and under Senate Bill 17 passed in 2023 and Senate Bill 37 passed in 2025, which if you're following my blog, you know what this is all about. It has now been operationalized into law. To understand what is happening in Texas higher education, we must call this what it is, a governance transformation justified through crisis discourse. Wilson and Kamola, in their book Free Speech and Cope Money, they show how selective campus incidents are magnified through coordinated media ecosystems and donor networks into quote-unquote evidence of systemic institutional failure. What might otherwise remain a local disagreement becomes proof of a national emergency. The whole McCool situation at A&M is definitely in that category. The cycle is predictable. Identify controversy, amplify outrage, declare ideological capture, and then legislate reform. In Texas, the crisis preceded the cure, right? The crisis discourse. Before Senate Bill 17 dismantled DEI infrastructures, DEI was framed as coercive orthodoxy. Dan Patrick called us loony Marxists. Offensive. Before Senate Bill 37 weakened shared governance, faculty senates were portrayed as partisan strongholds. The ground was prepared rhetorically long before it was altered legislatively. Nancy McLean reminds us that institutional transformation, it rarely occurs through dramatic abolition. It happens through procedural redesign. Authority quietly shifts governance structures. They get recalibrated. The institution remains standing, but its operating logic is what changes, like the logic of an operating board, right? It just changes. That is what SB 37 represents. It has been interesting being at UT for over 25 years now, and I have seen, I truly have, intense disagreements over public positions that faculty have taken. I've watched colleagues disagree sharply about theory, about politics, about pedagogy. That was not dysfunction. That was shared governance in action. What I've never seen until now was the systematic restructuring of governance itself through state mandate. The American Association of University Professors, AAUP, has been very clear. For over 80 years, academic freedom is not merely an individual right. It is a structural condition sustained by shared governance that helps us preserve our democracy. Faculty bear primary responsibility for curriculum and instruction, precisely because of our disciplinary expertise, the norms of our professions that are very powerful, and not political expediency. These are what should determine academic content, not politics. When faculty senates are weakened or replaced with advisory bodies responsive to political oversight, the architecture changes. Authority moves upward and outward. And here's the inversion. This restructuring is justified in the name of protecting free speech. Okay? This is the inversion that's happening. Let's pause. Let's pause right here. The disciplines that are most frequently labeled as propaganda, like women and gender studies, black studies, Mexican American and Latino studies, indigenous studies, etc., they operate through peer review, accreditation standards, and national scholarly associations. Again, those powerful norms of our professions. They assign canonical texts. They demand evidence-based argumentation. They expose students to intellectual traditions spanning centuries. Critique isn't cancellation. The irony is staggering here. It's the powers that be that are doing all the canceling. In fact, what these disciplines do systematically is to analyze power. They interrogate racial hierarchy, gender stratification, settler colonialism, capitalism, and state formation. They ask who benefits, who is excluded, and how institutions reproduce inequality. The analytic posture isn't authoritarianism at all. It's the foundation to the liberal arts and the social sciences. The deeper issue is authority. Who gets to decide what counts as legitimate knowledge? Certainly non-experts, as in terms of like what we're seeing happening in Texas right now. The AUP has repeatedly warned that legislative interference in curricular matters displaces professional judgment and produces chilling effects, even in the absence of explicit speech bans. When lawmakers define entire areas as suspect, scholars internalize this risk. Research agendas, they narrow, right? Syllabi narrow, hiring patterns shift. Students get the message. Students are affected deeply by this. This language of neutrality becomes the mechanism of control. Organizations such as the Heritage Foundation, they have advanced national reform blueprints targeting DEI, curriculum, and governance structures. These agendas do not typically call for closing universities or just shutting down entire areas and fields of study, right? They call for recalibrating them. Redefining academic freedom as compliance with political neutrality supervised, right? But in time, right, the recalibration is very devastating to our departments with faculty departures, with low faculty and student morale. So this is a definite squeeze, a definite harm that is being exacted by these policies. So when these reform agendas converge with state legislation like Senate Bill 17 that ended DEI offices and initiatives, and Senate Bill 37 that made extreme changes to faculty governance, then the result isn't policy, isn't one of what we can casually call disagreements, right? These are not disagreements. This is a structural realignment. And here is where Texas history matters. The state has long wrestled with who controls knowledge production, from textbook battles to bilingual education to bans over textbooks in K-12, the Ten Commandments, right, as public policy, and so on. The current moment is not an anomaly, no. It is a continuation of a longer struggle over narrative authority. Okay, so that's important to know. What is new is the scale of governance redesign. That's what's new, okay? These folks are desperate. If shared governance erodes, if faculty expertise is subordinated to political oversight, if entire domains of inquiry are stigmatized through law, the university does not collapse, it shifts. The liberal arts tradition conservatives claim to defend, it depends on contestation, from Plato's dialogues to Du Bois's sociological interventions to contemporary critical theory. A university cannot sustain a rigorous analysis of race and gender. If it cannot sustain rigorous analysis of race and gender, it is not defending liberal education. It is curating it. And that's really patronizing when you think about it. It's curating it. The question before Texas and Texans voters is not whether one agrees with every argument advanced in women and gender studies or ethnic studies. The question is whether academic legitimacy will continue to be determined by scholarly communities within shared governance structures or by political actors invoking crisis. Free speech does not erode because students argue, okay, please? They don't. Because students argue or they're offended in some spaces or places, or even if faculty are offended in some spaces or places. It erodes when government systems are redesigned to align inquiry with within state-defined boundaries. Senate Bill 17 and Senate Bill 37 are not cultural skirmishes by far. They are governance interventions. And governance is the backbone of academic freedom. Okay, you just can't really separate these. If we allow the backbone to weaken while congratulating ourselves for defending free speech, we should be honest about what is happening. We're not rescuing the liberal arts. We are redefining them in the image of political oversight. And of course, by we, I mean those in power. History teaches us that when authority over knowledge production shifts from scholarly communities to political power, the effects rarely remain confined to a single department. This is very important. Such shifts tend to expand, normalizing intervention and narrowing the boundaries of acceptable inquiry across the institution. Once the precedent is set, the legislatures may define which fields are suspect, which governance structures are dispensable, and which scholarly frameworks are legitimate. The logic does not easily contain itself. The question then is not whether one program is next or whether the university itself, its autonomy, its governing norms, its capacity for independent judgment is sustained, right? If it can withstand sustained political encroachment. At moments like this, the institutional repair that is required is much more than rhetorical defense. It requires civic action. If governance structures have been weakened through legislation, they must be restored through legislation. If academic freedom has been narrowed by those in power, then the democratic remedy is clear. You have a vote, right? Voters must hold these officials accountable. And they have to, we all have to elect leaders that are committed to institutional autonomy and the public mission of higher education. Public, _public. If we're truly to live in a free society, the defense of the university must be understood as inseparable from democracy and its defense. Have a great day.